for a long time, girls and women have had to fight to have a career, to be recognized as professionals. And so it sometimes feels like young girls are still rooting for traditional careers because there's still a point to prove and a place to be held. And whilst, there are many young girls and many women who are making it and are making it well in professions, and I'm talking about the traditional professions, sort of medicine, law, finance, economics and things like that. I think that there's still a drive towards those traditional careers more so than for boys and for young men. Obviously I come from the creative sector, and in fact our institution is primarily female. So it's those sort of non-traditional spaces, but most of the students are still opting for a career and employment, and an employed position and post. So I think the challenges are, as an entrepreneur and as a woman in business, the people that you encounter along the way. There aren't many female leaders, influencers, heroes for young girls to look up to and to reflect on and to find inspiration in. And I guess there's also an element of brevity that comes along with being an entrepreneur, and perhaps women don't always have the means to be that risky, if you like. So, if I'm in a career, obviously I'm getting my salary every month. There's a certain amount of security and stability and so on. As an entrepreneur, there's risks that you have to take. And I guess a lot of women are not always in a position where they can take those risks. So I guess some of the benefits that a woman or a young girl might have that would aid in a entrepreneurial sort of career or spirit or so on, we have a tendency to draw people towards us. We are mother hens. That's what we do, right? And that's often what I think makes entrepreneurs successful, is the following, and the people they surround themselves with. So, I would like to think that we have less of an ego problem and complex as women. We tend to be, I think, more inclusive. And just in that sort of gathering of people and support, we probably would be successful in entrepreneurial spaces, because that's really what you need. The worst entrepreneur is the one who wants to do it on his own. The guy that is happy to collaborate and cooperate and across different sectors or economies or whatever. Those are the guys that are going to get further in life. If we want to keep it all to ourselves and close to our chests, that's when we tend to trip up. I think key for me is consistency. It's about, waking up every morning saying, today I'm going to get this thing done. I'm going to put on my smile. I'm going to wave my hand. I'm, in some instances going to fake it till I make it. But you know what? I'm going to do it consistently. I'm going to remain positive. I'm going to keep doing the best that I can day after day after day after day. I mean, we know all the cliches of 10,000 hours of practice, makes Johnny a good golfer. And that's exactly it. I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact we're not always going to have the best day every day, but it's about, I suppose, striving to be as consistent as possible. The other thing that I think has helped me in my own sort of business journey and walk has been to be authentic. It's so difficult to be something you're not. It's so difficult to try and mirror somebody else's behavior or somebody else's vision or somebody else's sort of dream. When you show up as you, in your whole you, things are just a whole lot easier, right? It takes a lot less energy. So yeah, I guess it is about being authentic and about being consistent. When we think about, do women need something extra to be successful and as successful as men? As long as I'm doing what I do well, then I'm most likely going to be successful at it. do women have to sometimes do more than men perhaps have to do? Yes, of course we do, because, you know, that's the social construct that we live in. There are certain expectations and certain responsibilities, but I do think that we shouldn't undermine the role and the responsibilities that men have too. You know, if I just think in my own life, so probably my responsibilities at home are very front facing. So if I don't cook supper, nobody eats, right? My husband's responsibility is to keep the pool clean. Well, you know, I don't swim every day, so I don't notice that. So if he doesn't do the pool, I'm not really going to notice. But if I don't cook dinner, it's noticed. And so I think it is also about recognizing that everybody has their roles to play in whatever environment it's at, whether it's at work, whether it's in the home place. And I think it's a conversation. So, you know, I think there will be many times, and in a way, I almost feel a bit like men have been disempowered. I think it's difficult for men to often step up now because they've almost got to take a back seat. It's kind of one of those expected things, right? And but it's a conversation between two people to say, well, this is your role in the business, this is my role in the business, and let's bring our strengths to the table. I don't profess to be a man. I don't profess to have the strengths of a man. In fact, I embrace my feminine qualities. I'm far more emotional than a male counterpart would be in business, and I've been known to cry often in front of my staff. But that is my makeup. That's who I am. So I guess it's back to that thing of authenticity. I am not 100% mother. Or parent. I'm 50% parent, and my husband's 50% parent. But there are certain times where I can't step in because I have other commitments. And that hurts. You know, I want to be the mother that's there 100% and the, you know, CEO that's there 100%. And it's not always possible. And it's allowing the other people around me to step in and take that role, even if it's actually supposed to be my role. You know, I think just of last night, so my daughter had a music recital this morning. It would have been her first music recital. She was terribly nervous and had a complete meltdown. And I needed to be there, but I couldn't because I had to finish my project for my MBA. And, you know, and I kind of had to hand it over to my husband. And that would normally have been my role. So, you know, I guess it's about also acknowledging that I don't have to do everything. And there are other people, be they men or women, that could probably do the job as well and sometimes even better than me. How do I land up with an amazing husband who is so supportive and can take on non-traditional male roles in our family environment? So we have been married for 13 years. We've got 4 children. 2 of them are from a previous marriage of mine. So they're not his biological children, although he's adopted them. So he is essentially their dad. They are now 24 and 20. And then we have had 2 younger children together who are now 11 and 9. Boy, girl. Okay, so that's kind of our scenario. And, you know, it's quite interesting because when Dion and I met, I had been a single mother for 6 years. My first husband had left me when I was pregnant with my second child, with Gemma. And he came in like a knight in shining armor, and he wanted to save the day because, you know, we didn't have a dad. And it was really very interesting because we had operated as an independent unit for 6 years, and we were a very successful independent unit. And I had to kind of help him to understand that we were a family. This was our normal family. That was our reference point. And I think that's often something that, you know, we have these expectations of, I must get married at this age. I must have kids at this age. You know, once you're married, all the grannies and the aunties start asking, when is the bambino coming, and so on. I must have a career by this age. I must be, you know, have arrived by this age, and so on. And so breaking down those kind of traditional concepts of what is a family is so important because as a unit, we were succeeding. We were a very, very successful little family. And he came along and he wanted to save the day, and there was nothing to save. And I think when we started to understand that between the two of us, that was the beginning of figuring this thing out. Of course, you know, we got married, and at first his parents, you know, his dad said to him, "Oh, are you sure you want to be raising another man's children?" And he, you know, even some of his friends were a little bit against this thing. And of course, the relationship just kept working and just kept working despite all these external factors. And when we eventually decided we were getting married, we made a decision that we would treat all the children in the same way. So we wouldn't refer to them as step kids and so on. And in fact, we saw a psychologist, and my children, the first two, are Jordan and Gemma. And this psychologist said to us, continue naming any more children with a J, so that there's a kind of a sense of unity, which we did. So it's Jordan, Gemma, Jethro, and Jessica. We even went a step further, because it's Jordan, Eric, now Buhrs, Gemma, Ann Buhrs. So it was Jeb and Jab, and now we have Jethro Oliver Buhrs, Job, and Jessica Iris Buhrs. So we did Jeb, Jab, Job, and Jib. And that, it's such a sort of seemingly insignificant thing, but it's only very recently that the younger kids even realized that they weren't at the wedding, and if you talk to any of our kids, the concept of them not all being part of one unit is foreign. They are just brothers and sisters, and they're the best of mates, and it works. And so we went from this 3-person family to this 6-person family, and both those types of families are 100% acceptable and function in their own right. So we when we saw that psychologist, it was also a very interesting thing that we went through with her, where she kind of said, look, Helen, you are now 100% parent. Dion, you are a 0% parent. Dion, you can't become 100% parent. And Helen, you have to give away a 50% of the parenting. And so it was that balancing. So it was right from the beginning when we met that we intentionally and consciously worked on creating a family environment that was, set up for success, I suppose. One of the things you asked me is about Dion's background and whether it comes naturally to him to be sort of in a supporting role in many instances, or whether it's a learned behavior. So his father is deaf, he's hard of hearing, and his mom was really always the sort of the breadwinner and, the driver in the family and so on. So I think he's used to having a mom who would go out to work and do those sorts of things. He came from quite a hard upbringing. So, there were times where they weren't sure where the next meal was coming from, kind of thing. But he always saw that, his mom had gone out and fought and done this. So for him to have a strong woman in his life, I think he might not always agree that it's easy, but it was something that was familiar to him. And I think he often feels that because of his dad's disability, he didn't have a full dad all the time. He couldn't engage in deep, meaningful conversations with him. And so he will now do that with his own children, because that's what he feels he lost out on. And so he's the greatest dad ever. He really spends so much time with the kids, and he's very, very involved in their lives. And so, it makes it all work, I suppose. That taking off the armor is a really cool concept, because it's about making yourself vulnerable, right? And so he's made himself vulnerable over and over and over again to the benefit of the family. That kind of making oneself vulnerable is far more difficult for me, and where you would, your immediate sort of thought would be, well, for a woman to be vulnerable should be a lot easier than for a man. And yet in our instance, I can honestly say, Dion, he does that. He makes himself vulnerable for the benefit of the family. I find that a lot more difficult. It's taken me a lot of work and effort to let that wall down, because of course, I've had to be a superwoman and a power woman and a single mother and all these things, and to kind of redefine and lose that armor, as you say, is it's not an easy process. So when we talk about choosing the right partner, and I suppose more in the work sense than in personal lives, right? So we're talking about choosing a partner for work and for business and so on. How do we go about that? So I've done quite a reflection on my own life and how I've chosen people, to surround me and to support me through my own journey. And the reflection has revealed that I tend to choose older men to partner with. In fact, I recently did a talk where I spoke about bosses, previous bosses that I'd had, and I've had good bosses and great bosses, but all of my bosses have been men. All of the consultants that I've ever appointed, most of them, I think I've appointed one female consultant. All the consultants I appoint are men. And it really kind of made me start to think, well, why do I do that? And I know that, you know, having been through my life and my journey, my love language is words of affirmation, and I seek affirmation from men. And I, you know, I kind of almost feel like I've always put myself in a place where I would have older men around me because perhaps I feel I need them. Perhaps I feel safe there. Perhaps I feel they're smarter than me. I don't know. I'm still trying to sort of grapple with this thing. Why do I keep doing that? In my business, you know, when I took over the business in 2014, it was a mainly female management. There were very, very few men in the business. And I've appointed a lot of men into the business. And so it is a very interesting concept and an interesting thing to think about. You know, why do I choose older men to partner with? And for me to understand what that thing is that drives me there. It doesn't make it right and it doesn't make it wrong. But there's obviously, I'm expressing a need there that I don't have. Perhaps I'm recognizing that those men have something that I don't have, which is a good thing. If I'm selecting men because I have some kind of flaw in my character or some kind of issue I'm dealing with, of course, that's something I need to work through and figure out. So, you know, when it comes to actually choosing people to surround yourself with, you know, they always say you should choose smarter people, choose brighter people, choose faster people, choose, you know, the worst thing one can do is to select people who are who bring less than what you do or bring the same value that you do. So, you know, it's about finding people who are going to bring new perspectives, bring different values to the party, different ideas and different concepts. So I would, yeah, I don't know why I choose the people I choose. I'm still working through that, but I think it's because I recognize they have something I don't necessarily have. Yeah, so when we look at concepts of empowerment and diversity, you know, it can often be quite a controversial conversation, and, you know, a lot of sensitivity around diversity. And, you know, are we implementing diversity for the sake of box ticking, or are we implementing diversity for the real benefit of the humans that are in the system? And, you know, first and foremost, with diversity comes different perspectives. It comes, you know, different viewpoints. When we intentionally started to transform Inscape from a student demographic perspective, so, you know, and a number of years ago, when the demographics started to shift, there were so many unintended consequences that we experienced in a positive way, things that we hadn't even considered. So, you know, we are busy training up designers and problem solvers for the future. Well, if all of you are white Afrikaans females, then, you know, how diverse is your thinking going to be? How good are your problem solving skills really going to be? But when you are exposed to other people from other religions, races, cultures, demographics, genders, you've now got an opportunity to test concepts and to test thinking against a different viewpoint, a different background. And so the shifting of the demographics at the institution enabled the students to have a much stronger problem-solving capability and outlook on life. And, you know, I mean, that's in an educational environment. If that was throughout our entire system, can you imagine the benefits we would derive in business? You know, if we were surrounding ourselves with a diverse range of people, how much sort of richness that would bring to our offerings to the world, and how we could really make a difference. So one of the things, though, that I think is often quite challenging is, and I guess it's when people are in a minority within an organization, people may feel like they need to be something they're not when they arrive at work, that they don't necessarily want to share what's going on at home, because they come from a different environment to the majority of the people in that space. And I think that kind of holding back and not arriving as your whole human being, with your whole background, compromises the system and compromises the understanding that we have of each other. And it's those breaking down of those barriers and providing safe spaces where we can talk about the challenges we have at home. Because I think we'll often assume that, I have these challenges, but sure, she always looks fantastic. Life must be great for her all the time. There's nothing she worries about. There's nothing that concerns her. She doesn't really have any troubles. But, everybody has their story, right? And yeah, I guess that's one of our challenges, is that we don't always have those safe spaces to arrive to be able to break down those barriers and empower a sense of diversity, true diversity. Because I think it's also, you can put different people of different shapes and sizes and colors and genders and races into one room, but unless there's a sense of belonging, and unless there's an openness to learning about each other, and really kind of getting deep and dirty, then what are we actually empowering? Yeah, when we talk about women empowerment and the role man has to play in that scenario, it's quite a challenging one, I think, because, we all like to sit today and go, sure, in 2022, surely that's not still happening. And just by letting those words out of our mouths is a state of denialism right there, and closes the conversation points, right? My advice to any man really is actually just to listen. It's very easy for us when it's not easy, but I think it just happens, that sort of concept of othering, they, them, and so on. This is an issue that is for all of us. It belongs to all of us. It's not just for women to kind of rah and jump up and down and prove a point. We need an environment where men are consciously going to sit back and just listen and hear us. And it's if you go back to the typical constructs of man and woman and a relationship, how many times in a relationship does a woman sort of come home and go, oh, this happened and that happened, and the next thing, and the man wants to jump in and solve the problem for her. And we go, just listen to me, babe. I don't want you to solve the problem for me. Just listen. And so it's not natural for man to sit back and just listen. And I think often just even listen to yourself as a man, when I'm saying something, so recently on social media, I posted, I reposted what was it? It was a picture, I suppose, a picture of a whole lot of head of security guys that were in a meeting to do with the Russia-Ukraine. I'm not sure if you saw that picture floating around, and it was a long table with elderly, sort of like 60s, 70s, gray white men in dark suits, and there they were discussing the security of, what's going on with the war. And so there were a couple of comments about that, so, how are these guys going to come up with a solution that's different to any previous solution, because they all look the same? Where's the diversity in this room? And somebody, actually a guy that I know quite well, commented and said, I can't believe it's happening in today's times. And I had to say to him, but hang on a second, of course it's happening. It might not be happening in your circle. He's married and he has 3 daughters. And so his world is about women empowerment. And my world, I like to think that I'm empowering women and girls around me, that I'm speaking that language. But those are bubbles in the world. And in the main, I think, you're right. I think men still have a very traditionalist view, and they don't know how to engage always on this matter. But I think, the first thing for me is really just sit back and listen to what we're saying, but listen to hear. because I think it's very easy to also go, oh, they're nagging again. So, yeah. Why are scholarships important in our world? First and foremost, because people need affirmation, because people need to know that they're recognized. You'll often read that people don't stay in jobs because of salaries. They stay there because they're recognized for the value that they bring. And that often trumps, what I can put in my back pocket. And a scholarship does exactly that. There are scholarships, as you say, that are awarded for excellence. And then there are scholarships that are awarded for excellence, but perhaps because somebody is previously disadvantaged, doesn't have the funds, can't access the education or so on. The scholarship program that I started in 2014 was really it started to appease my own place where I was at the time. So I had taken over Inscape. I had settled in as the managing director. I had been working through each department. I was looking for efficiencies and effectiveness and managed to sort of turn the business around, start producing a profit. And I became so consumed with that bottom line that I one day woke up and I realized I'd lost my passion for education, because for 15 years before that, I'd been a lecturer. And, I'm a designer by trade with a postgrad in education. But I'm an educator at heart. And here I had become a business person overnight, and I was dealing with ledgers and journals and trial balances and HR and UIF and all sorts of things like that. And I became completely consumed with sort of the operational efficiencies of the business. So yeah, woke up one morning, said, hang on a second, something's not right here. And so I decided that what I would do was to intentionally shift my own thinking. I would take R1 million and I would put a big billboard up and give R1 million worth of bursaries away. And so that, it would hurt. And so that was basically what I did. The first year was an epic fail. So we got 50 applications, but they were all from youngsters who probably at a pinch could have accessed private education. And they were all white kids as well. So, it was not what we were kind of planning on doing. I was looking for kind of needles in haystacks. I was looking for diversity. I was looking for previously disadvantaged individuals and so on. Anyway, the first year, it was an epic fail. Nonetheless, we had promised to do it. So we did. We enrolled 12 students. Very, very successful, 100% success rate. They graduated a number of years ago and they've gone out into industry and are all doing very well. The second year, I collaborated with SABC Education. And so for every rand that I gave away as a bursary, they would match me in flight time. And so we had some great videos on TV and so on. And that year we had over 300 applications. More than 60% of the youngsters were either from child-headed households or on government grants. So, where a family of 4 or 5 would be earning 1,400 Rand a month. That was what they were living off. And we found the most incredible human beings in that second year of the scholarship program. In the second year, we enrolled, I think it was 24 scholarship students into first year, plus, of course, we had the 12 that then went on to second year. And that first, the second batch of scholarship students, but kind of my first real batch of scholarship students, is probably the reason that I keep getting up today. So some incredible human beings in that group, and even afterwards, who have gone on to do amazing things. We had students there that, like I say, came from child-headed households. One of the students literally came off the streets, and they've now got degrees and they're back in their communities and doing amazing things and supporting families. And they've become superheroes and role models for, kids in their own communities, which is, exactly what I'd wanted to achieve. One of the things that I learned in that year, and this probably came from my own white privilege sort of space that I live in, I had this idea that I was putting money behind these youngsters and that they would, come and do their studies. And of course, I hadn't stopped to understand their world. And so, one student stopped coming to class. Why are you not coming to class? Well, I can't afford to catch the taxi. Okay, right. Okay, here's taxi fare for the rest of the year. Okay, then the next one, it couldn't come because they were protesting on the trains. Okay, well, what's it going to cost for us to rent you a room closer to campus, which we did. And so what we'd budgeted in that first year became something completely different. Eventually, we were renting rooms, we were paying for groceries, we were doing taxi fare, but we saw those youngsters through the program, and they went on to qualify and so on. So since then, we've managed to bring 188 students onto the program since 2015. And like I say, we've got some really, really incredible stories of, guys that have gone out. We've had a couple of scholarship students who have become emerging creatives with Design Indaba. We've had students that come back to us and kind of talk to us about the difference they make in their own communities as a result of what they've been able to achieve. And so it is, it's an excellent program that has an excellent throughput rate as well. So, we have a 94% success rate of our scholarship students, which is also completely unheard of. If you do any studies globally, financially aided students in this sort of environment or that sort of bracket of individual, you tend to have about a 20% success rate, because there are so many external factors that influence and impact their studies that it makes it so difficult to actually see through the studies. But we've got brilliant systems in place. We also provide all of our students with, all their equipment and software and so on. And the scholarship students receive the same. So everybody kind of starts on an even playing field as well. So yeah, a very, very successful program. We continue to have applications increase each year. We can only afford to sponsor a certain number of students each year. And so I did start a nonprofit company a few years ago, with the idea of trying to raise funds through corporates and so on. We have had some small successes. Belgatex Flooring continue to support us annually. They provide us with R1 million a year. We've had a couple of other smaller organizations that have come on board and sort of contribute each year. And of course, companies can receive Section 18A certificates and BE points for their spend and so on. So, it's a program that's successful and it works and it's making a difference in the world. So, looking for funding. Yeah, when we talk about sort of finding solutions for problems and, failing forward, that's probably one of my greatest strengths. So my husband will always say that I remind him of, I'm not sure if you remember those reality programs on TV where the guys would jump from inflatable to inflatable and they'd fall off into the water and so on. And then they just get back on and they keep going. And that's a little bit like how I operate, right? So, failing for me is not an option, and not in an arrogant sense, and not because I'm scared to fail. I'm not scared to fail. But failing is not an option for me because out of every failure, there's a learning opportunity. And so there's a reason that I was put into that place at that time. And there's something that I needed to learn out of it, and there's something that I needed to give into it. And for me, I think, as long as I'm doing everything with the right intention, then even if it doesn't work out, then if it's with the right intention, it must be right. So it might not work, but it's still right. I think I remember, I took on a class of students a number of years ago. I'd in fact stopped lecturing. I was in management, but we had a class where there seemed to be some real problems in this class, and they were all failing and the lecturers didn't know what to do with them and so on. And so I said, well, give it to me. I'd love a challenge like that. And I realized that nobody was actually listening to these guys. And, so I drew up a survey and I just wanted to know about them. And when I could say to them, guys, do you know that there's so many of you in this class have been captains of a sports team, and so many of you have played provincial this or that. And, 80% of you fear failure. That I still remember that was one of the things that came out. And we could start unpacking what does failure actually mean. And eventually we arrived at the point of, well, yeah, I'm scared to fail, but you know what? I'm more scared to succeed because, when you fail, you just move to the next thing, and you try something else, or you shift the, you shift the trajectory, or there is no option to fail. Not because failing is not something I do. I fail all the time, but I fail forward. So, another very good example, so you talk about the scholarship program, and where there were challenges along the way, and we kind of addressed them and changed them and fixed them. But with each one of those, the intention was right. We wanted to make sure that those youngsters were successful, because it's less important how many youngsters we get into the program, more important how many we get through the program. Otherwise, we've just wasted money and we've wasted everybody's time. Another example, we planted a campus in Dubai, and the campus was doing particularly well. In fact, in 2020, in the first quarter, we had brought in as much revenue as we brought in 2019. And then COVID happened. And COVID was not friendly to us in Dubai. In South Africa, we shifted all of our students online very quickly. We lost no academic days. We'd already started we had already digitally transformed the organization in 2013 and 2014. So we were ready, for this kind of thing. And we had really good success rates with our students. In Dubai, our students here are mainly school leavers, right, in degrees and so on. In Dubai, we're serving a market that is about training. So they're more mature people, they've got families, they've got jobs. The last thing on their minds was coming to complete their course that they were doing with us. And so, COVID was not good to us in Dubai. And we tried to shift, and eventually we said, you know what, we're going to run this exercise from home. And we brought our staff back, and now we're operating our Dubai activities from South Africa. And so it was, it's kind of that accepting that, well, did we fail in Dubai? No, we didn't fail in Dubai. We learned a lot in Dubai. We grew in confidence because of Dubai. We met new people. We made amazing friends. And now we're actually operating less costly, more successfully, so it gave us something new. So no, we didn't fail, or we failed forward. I think there are also a lot of women who fear failure. I think it's a human thing to fear failure. And I think it's, they say failure is an emotion, fear is an emotion. So it's something you can decide to switch on and off. And maybe sometimes we've got to sit there and just convince ourselves, I am not scared. I am not scared. I'm not scared. I'm okay with this. And almost talk ourselves into it. Influences in my life that have got me to where I am today. Probably I would say the most influential thing was the school that I went to for high school, for, in those days, standard 8, 9, and 10. So I was in a public primary school in Pretoria. I've lived in a 5-kilometer radius all my life, by the way. So I traveled a lot. I've been fortunate to travel, but I've always lived in Pretoria. I went to traditional primary school and the beginning of high school. And then my parents moved me to Woodmead High School, which was in Joburg. It was the first fully multiracial school in South Africa. And we also had a charter. We didn't have lots of rules and things like that. And really, there were sort of 3 key principles that you had to follow. So be kind, have self-respect, those sorts of things. We didn't have prefects. We didn't get detention. We had an SRC who kind of managed the school. And if somebody was out of line, the SRC dealt with it. We didn't wear uniforms. The school was very much about self-discipline, autonomy, independent thinking, problem solving. We had integrated studies as a subject, and I'm going back 20 odd years now. That was unheard of. So I was, in my sort of formative teenage years, exposed to a number of different types of people. And that is, I think, where I came to understand and accept and acknowledge that, I was one of a rainbow nation. Whereas prior to that, I had been in very much a traditional white school, the Model C schools. So I still think that Woodmead was probably the most influential part of, what's formed my thinking today. My parents are both very liberal. They immigrated here from the UK. And so I'd always had quite a liberal upbringing. And I think they also encouraged me to be who I wanted to be. I think they encouraged all of us as kids to do that. And I think that's something that Dion and I do as well, is, you know, each for his own. And, we build each character individually and harness each person's strengths, to the point that at some point we had all 4 kids in 4 different schools, because, you know, not to be convenient for us, but, you know, for the benefit of each little human being. You know, other influences in my life, I'm a very strong Christian, and, you know, grounded in Christian principles. And, you know, I'm a great believer that, you know, I'm not in 100% control. And I think the day that I realized that, and that, you know, I don't have to control everything, I can't control everything, sometimes it is going to be what it is, was the day that perhaps I think my shoulders, you know, were less tense, and I could honestly say that I found content in where I'm at. And not to say that it's not tough, you know, days are tough. You know, this last week has been tough at work, but you know, I also recognize that we placed in these tough positions to grow character, and you know, to kind of jump to the next challenge, I guess. You know, when we talk about managing time and also managing environments, so of course, you know, as you say, you know, your work environment demands a certain something from you, and a certain persona, and your home environment demands something completely different. I don't think I always get it right. It's not often easy to leave one hat at the door and put another hat on. But I think, you know, I live in a family environment where there's unconditional love between all members. And, you know, somebody can very quickly say to me, okay, you need to get off your high horse now. You know, I'm not your secretary, or whatever the case is. So, yeah, I don't think it is easy. I think what has become even more difficult, and this is with the, you know, since we're working from home a lot more, you know, when you went to the office every single day and then you drove home, that drive allowed you to kind of desensitize and gear up for the next moment. Some of the things that I have implemented in the past that I'm not very consistent with, but in this regard, is, you know, at one point when I used to come home, go for a walk around the block, because that would, you know, kind of the trees and the outdoors and the so on, different environment, kind of takes the edge off, and now you're ready for home. Since we're now working at home a lot more, and because I'm studying, I tend to be in my office until 5 or 6 o'clock, go downstairs, you know, cook supper, spend some time with the family, back into my office. And that's been my life for the last few weeks. So I think it's also about kind of having an environment where everybody is understanding of it. And I realize and I recognize that whilst somebody might say, yes, we support you to study, we support you to do this, we support you to do that, saying I support you and actually living that support is 2 very different things. And so now I recognize it's also my responsibility, and I can see the flags when it's time to now go, okay, time to close the laptop. We need to do something as a family. And like I said, I don't always get it right. What I am very good at doing from a time management perspective, and I know whenever I've shared this with people, they've said, oh, well, that's an amazing idea. I have doing weeks and thinking weeks. And if I'm in a doing week and you ask me to give you a decision or to think about something, I'll actually say to you, look, Simon, I'm sorry, I can't get it done for you this week. How about end of next week? Can I give you a decision then? And if I'm in a thinking week and you ask me to do something for you, then I might say, well, look, you know, let me have a think about it. I'll get it done for you by next Tuesday. Then I know next week I'm in my doing week. So my life can work in weeks because, you know, it's a bit slower. If I was on a campus in my organization where things are fast paced, I might have doing days and thinking days. But that definitely has allowed me to put boundaries in place, because I think we often are too quick to say, yes, yeah, sure, I'll get it done for you. And the next thing, you've got this long list of things you've got to do for everybody else. And now you are left to prioritize it instead of actually batting it and just sort of, you know, positioning it for when I will be ready to do it for you. So doing and thinking weeks have been incredible for me. You know, even to the point where I will do it at home as well. Of course, when I'm thinking, I'm slower and I'm more reflective. When I'm in a doing space, then I'm motoring through lists, I'm getting things done, and then I'll even take personal things like, oh, I need to go and get a new blazer for this kid, or I need to get, a cricket bat, or I must also book that appointment or do that. Those go into doing weeks. And then I just get through the list because I don't have to think too deeply about those things. We do it often in our workplace. We're very good at that. So now I've got to go and meet with the boss. Well, I'm going to put on a certain persona. Now I'm with my kitchen, I can put on a different persona. When I'm with clients, I'm going to put on a different persona. And so we are capable of doing that in our working environments because it's to our benefit, right? It's a part of a negotiation, and it's part of an internal collaboration strategy and so on. And even if we're not doing it consciously, we do it because we need to benefit from something. And I think often when we get home, we don't apply the persona that we need at home because we don't see it as an immediate benefit for me, right? It becomes a drag, like, oh, I've had such a hard day at work, it's been so difficult, like really now must I come and be kind to you all? And actually we do need to do that. We do need to put on that persona for home. Because it is to my benefit to have a good solid engagement from my kids, from my husband, and so on. And it makes for a much happier home life, which then makes life in general a whole lot happier. So I think that's also something key, is that sometimes you actually just got to suck it up and put on a different face for your own benefit too. So servant leadership, I think, is often viewed as a weakness. And, to be a servant leader is a lot more difficult than to be an autocratic kind of, leader who's going to push from the front and so on, or drive from the front. We definitely need a more servant leader kind of approach in general in South Africa. I think because we need people to cooperate with us. Certainly I do. So, if I'm going to sit and tell everybody what to do all the time, I'm not really going to get buy-in. Whereas, if I'm serving for their benefit, which is, what I do. And it's so interesting because my husband and I were talking about this concept just this weekend of, if you've had a time in your life where your life was not great, and then you moved into a phase of life where life became great. And I have a life like that. It's very much linked with my religious walk, my Christian walk. I sit with this burden of, well, you know what, I've been transformed from this one kind of human being in this kind of life to a completely different human being. And there's this sense of indebtedness that, for the rest of my life, I now need to make right by others and I need to serve others. And that in itself becomes a burden. So to kind of keep remembering why one serves other people as a leader is quite important, because it can become burdening on your soul that you're always doing everything for everybody else. But that's also part of, if you are stepping up and saying, I'm going to take this position, I'm going to be a leader, I'm happy to take this responsibility, because it is a choice, nobody forces you into that position. Then by doing that, you accept the fact that you are going to serve other people in that leadership role. So I guess it's part of accepting the responsibility of that, and that, yes, it is going to be a burden at times, and yes, it is tough, and you've got to constantly put a smile on your face and be the answer and be the shining light and so on. But that's the responsibility and the choice you made. You can opt out of it at any time, right? So we often talk about how tough it is at the top and how lonely it is at the top and so on. But actually, you choose to be there. I'd give free education to everybody. No, okay. What would my wand do in South Africa right now? If I had a magic wand, I would want to empower a lot more youngsters in education, and I think in less traditional education. I would want to sort of drive the skills of the future, which is what I'm doing in any event, but I would want that to be accessible to a lot more people. we've got such great opportunities in this country. And, you know, despite everything that goes on, I have such great hope for this country still. There's, you know, when you talk to the guy on the street, when you really get into the heart of South Africa, you realize that we are great people that actually really want to work together, and we want to make a difference, and we want to move forward. But unfortunately, we are limited by corruption and, you know, system failure and all those sorts of things that are very, very difficult elephants to eat, right? It's very difficult to solve for those things. But yeah, if my 100% feeling is that if we could provide education, quality education, to a lot more individuals, then we could turn this country around. So, okay, as a people, what could we be focusing on, and you know, what sort of energy do we need, and where are we going to get that energy from, you know, to move a country like South Africa forward? I think often we have moments in South Africa where we come together as a nation. You know, I think of the World Cup. I think of you know, the riots that we had last year in KZN. There were a number of people who came together and kind of, you know, stuck together and so on. So we have these moments in South Africa where there's great energy and there's great togetherness. And I think that we function well in crisis in South Africa. You know, we're known around the world as survivors. We are also known as hard workers and so on. And we deal well with adversity. And the sad thing for me is that, imagine if we could elicit that kind of energy without a crisis, because I think what we also tend to do as a nation is we become complacent. So when there isn't a crisis to unify us, then we all kind of sit back and the potholes grow, and, you know, the rubbish gathers, and, you know, crime goes up again and so on. And I wonder if we had to focus our energy at a time where there's not necessarily crisis as such, if we could make more of a difference. You know, why is it when there's a World Cup we pick up all the litter? Why are we not doing that all the time? Why do we as humans walk past litter and not pick it up? Why do we as humans, you know, walk past an elderly person crossing the road and not help them? Why do we you know, see a lady struggling with a baby and not help her? And you see it too often. I mean, even, you know, traveling on the car, train and so on, often see, you know, young people sitting on chairs and elderly people standing. And I think to myself, you know, what's going on here? Something's not right. But I do think it's, as a people, we do that when we don't have a crisis to address, to unify us, we become complacent. So yeah, I would implore us to kind of try and find that energy that we find, that obviously comes from somewhere in us, because we're very good at it, you know, in a more consistent fashion. I think that would really make a difference. And I guess that's harder, right? Because it's this keep on keeping on rather than these flash in the pan moments. We do have entrepreneurial studies built into our programs. And in fact, we've offered business as part of our design degrees for many, many years. Yeah. And so, you know, we tend to have independent thinkers when they leave the institution. Often our graduates will tell us that, you know, they feel quite sort of defined by the industry. And so we've kind of adopted this approach of, you know, we won't allow the industry to define us. We will define, you know, our graduates will define the industry. And that's exactly what happens. So there is definitely you know, because of the critical skills thinking and the, you know, the ideation components of our programs and so on, when the graduates leave, they go on to do really random stuff, actually, you know, but stuff that changes the world and stuff that makes a difference, and big world solutions, which is incredible. So yeah, I mean, we're teaching that in the course. We're teaching the students to be autonomous, to think independently. My 100% feeling is that if we could provide education, quality education, to a lot more individuals, we could turn this country around.